Long overdue Ultimate Fighting Championship debut in Canada's largest city goes down Saturday night. This is a very special edition of the MMA show, UFC 129 Toronto.
And waste no time because it is on.
He's tapping. He's tapping.
Good left hand. The end is there. And that is it. Just like that. And Corbin picks him up. The powerbomb slam. It's over. He comes back down. Oh, goes Smith. What a knockout. Hey, to bring down the curtain.
Oh my goodness.
Did you see that?
Yo, 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 and away we go with this very special edition of Canada's first and most comprehensive mixed martial arts program. This is the MMA show. I'm Mauro Ranallo, and we are at UFC's headquarters in Toronto, getting set for the biggest mixed martial arts event in North American history. A record 55,000 fans will convene at the Rogers Centre on Saturday night for UFC 129, the Ultimate Fighting Championship's much-anticipated debut in Canada's largest city. And coming up in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to, give you a short history of Canada's contribution to the Ultimate Fighting Championships. I'll be joined by MMAfighting.com's Ariel Helwani to preview the main card for UFC 129. And by the way, the event does feature a record Canadian contingent of 10 fighters stepping inside the octagon. But things got underway Wednesday with the press conference, and the Score's Sid Cixero was there.
After what seemed like an endless lobbying campaign, UFC President Dana White finally has what he's wanted for years, an event in Toronto.
We did it. The question was always, can we do a stadium? Can we do it? Can we keep that feel? Not only did we do it, we made it even better. I made sure we landed in some crazy fog last night, man. I didn't care. I wanted to get to Toronto bad. Even thinking about this fight gives me the goosebumps. I'm a huge fight fan at the end of the day, and to be in an arena with 55,000 people is going to be, the energy in there is going to be amazing.
White's initial Toronto experience has gone far better than even he could have imagined. Saturday's card at Rogers Centre sold out in no time at all. And the province of Ontario, who for a long time considered MMA an afterthought, is hoping that the 55,000 who descend upon Toronto gives the local economy a much-needed boost. The UFC estimates that anywhere from $30 to $40 million will be spent in TO this week alone.
All the hotels are sold out this weekend. People are going to be eating in restaurants. People are going to be going out at night. People are going to be going to the malls. And I said this all the time when we were trying to get sanctioned in Ontario. Believe me when I tell you, when we pull out of here on Sunday, the city won't be able to wait for us to come back.
For an event this big, you need big names headlining, and Canadian welterweight champ George St. Pierre certainly fits the bill. He'll be defending his title against Jake Shields, a relative unknown among casual MMA observers, but those who know the sport know full well what he's capable of. Shields hasn't lost a fight in 7 years, and St. Pierre realizes what kind of threat he poses.
In terms of pressures, never had so much pressure in my life. But you know what? Every fight is going to be the same now. Every fight gets bigger and bigger, and I'm at my best when I perform under pressure. I'm at my best when I feel like I'm right on the edge, if I'm about to fall off the edge. But that's when I perform the best, and I try to embrace the situation.
I don't really look at myself as an underdog. I just go out there and look at the fight and break it down and go out there to win it. Some people come to underdog and it gets in their head mentally, and they don't believe they can win. But in me, that's not the case. I'm ready to go out there and shock the world again.
Shields and St. Pierre are headlining a card that's already garnered a tremendous amount of interest from the ticket-buying public. And based on what we're hearing, the ticket buying may not be over. UFC Canada President Tom Wright said an additional 500 to 1,000 tickets will be made available for Saturday's card, making what's already become the biggest event in company history just a little bit bigger. Covering UFC 129 in Toronto, I'm Sid Cixero, The Score.
Thanks a lot, Portuguese Prince of Pugilism. And yes, one of the major storylines surrounding UFC 129 in Toronto is the swan song of UFC Hall of Famer Randy the Natural Couture. We had a chance to speak with the three-time heavyweight champion and two-time light heavyweight champion about his decision to finally hang up the 4-ounce gloves following Saturday night's fight with Lyoto Machida. I've known you a few years now. Why this time? Why? I mean, You know, it's not like Father Time is catching up to you anytime soon at 47. Why now?
No, I think now's the right time. I can go out on my terms when everything still works and functions the way it's supposed to, and go out on a high note. You know, I left before because there was a lot of personal things going on, and I needed a break. I wasn't getting the job done. That's not the case now, and I've got a lot of other positive things going on in my life that I want to focus on.
How much did the fact that this is a historic event, the biggest event in North American MMA history, how much did the whole spectacle of UFC 129 play a part in you making the announcement that you did?
Yeah, that was the icing on the cake for sure. You know, I contemplated it with the Boston fight and James Toney, and then they asked me to fight Lyoto, and the fight was on and then off. And then,
did they ask you? Because you said there were two fights you wanted, Mauricio Shogun or Lyoto Machida.
Yeah, no, they asked me if I would fight Lyoto, and I said yes, and they said no, that was off, and then to Lyoto's credit, he pushed for it, and it was back on. So, and it just seemed like the right time. And then it turned out to be this event, this place, you know, this crowd.
Still to come, a look at Canada's contribution to the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And when we come back, MMA Fighting's Ariel Helwani will join me to break down UFC 129 in Toronto. You're watching the MMA Show. Thanks for sticking with the score in this very special edition of the MMA Show. UFC 129 Toronto. Here's what went down this week in mixed martial arts history. At UFC 42, Matt Hughes retained the welterweight championship, defeating Sean Shirk. And joining me now is none other than the Titan of Twitter from MMAfighting.com, fellow Canadian Ariel Helwani. And Ariel, before we get into the UFC 129 main card preview, we talked about Matt Hughes in the On This Day in History feature. Obviously, Hughes was the man who first defeated George St. Pierre, but then, of course, GSP was able to dominate him in two following fights to, of course, become welterweight champion. Took a little bit of a hiccup step back against Matt Serra, but now really has asserted himself as one of the more dominant champions in MMA history. And we're going to start with the UFC 129 main event, GSP versus Jake Shields. Not many people giving Shields much of a chance. Why should we give him a chance?
I think we should give him a chance because, no one has been able to figure him out for several years. He's fought some of the best at 170 and 185. And really, when you look at Jake Shields, it's all about the ground game with him. If he could take this fight to the ground, he has a chance. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't have a very good striking game, very stiff as a striker, and we saw against Dan Henderson he was rocked, and you don't really like to look at that Henderson fight because that was a 185-pound fight, and Henderson often fights at 205. So,
and that was, with all due respect, an under-the-weather Dan Henderson.
Right.
No excuses, but I don't think you want to look, as you say, at that fight and predict what's going to happen against GSP.
But you could look at the way Jake Shields has boxed over his career, and recently he just hasn't turned into the kind of striker that GSP is. Look at the way
thinking
GSP
of the sticks, domo arigato, Mr. Roboto, when you watch Shields strike.
Look at the way that GSP used his jab against Josh Koscheck.
Unbelievable.
You look at the last couple of times that GSP fought a guy with a great wrestling background, John Fitch, Josh Koscheck. He was able to control them on the feet, close the distance, use his jab. I mean, he's so good at that, he won't be able to do that against
Now,
Jake
I
Shields.
ran into Firas Zahabi here at UFC headquarters in Toronto, and he told me that he had been rolling GSP with 20 BJJ black belts at Hensel Gracie's gym in your backyard there in New York City. Is this more just to keep it sharp? Because I just don't see why GSP wouldn't want to keep this standing where he is a much, much better fighter than Jake Shields. So why do you think he spent so much time on his
He has to be ready for everything. I mean, GSP, much like Randy Couture, who's fighting on this card, is great at coming up with the perfect game plan. The perfect game plan to negate the other guy's strength. So he has to be ready if this fight goes to the ground. I mean, he is great off his back. He's a great wrestler, great takedown defense, great BJJ, trains with John Danaher as well. So, I mean, he'll be ready if the fight goes there. But if I'm GSP and his team, I want to keep this fight standing most of the fight.
And Jake Shields brought in Chael Sonnen, Matt Lindland to help with his wrestling. I think, as we all know, GSP has the best MMA-style wrestling. And when we talk about MMA wrestling, we mean the fact that he's able to seamlessly go from striking to takedowns and use the strikes and the setups. Jake Shields, same kind of guy, though.
Yeah, he's able to change levels very, very well. And it was funny, Jake Shields actually wasn't all that complimentary of GSP's wrestling on a conference call last week, saying that it's nothing spectacular. I mean, single leg, whatever. You know, this is stuff that is sort of basic. And he considers himself to be a top-level wrestler, grappler. So that was funny because there's been a lot of mutual respect thrown both ways. But I think that obviously it's no secret. Jake Shields wants to take this fight to the ground. GSP wants to keep this fight standing. I think GSP, given his great takedown defense, will be able to keep the fight standing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think, in fact, that he will eventually take it down, maybe third, fourth round, TKO,
Really?
breaking the record. I think he's going to stop him. What do you think? It's going to go the distance?
The distance. I hate to predict another GSP decision, but I just can't see him finishing Jake Shields, and that's because I have so much respect for Jake Shields.
And I agree
Tough
with you,
guy to
but I
finish.
think GSP also wants to make a statement against the critics who say maybe he's fighting too conservative. Although, again, when you fight the best in the world, you're going to have tough fights. And what another Canadian story that is building with Mark the Machine Hominick vying for the UFC featherweight title against Jose Aldo. Hominick, of course, I think I'm falling in love with the story. Not to discount Jose Aldo and what he's done. He's been a wrecking machine, going 8-0 in WEC, destroying Mike Brown, defending the title twice before, of course, the WEC was absorbed into the Ultimate Fighting Championship. A lot of people think we have to look back at the Faber title defense to see what Aldo is going to do against Mark Hominick. And yet I think Hominick, technically the best striker that Aldo's ever faced, but I think technically that may also be a disadvantage. I don't know if Hominick is quick enough to get inside and outside the pocket and avoid those lethal leg kicks.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Aldo. If there was one guy that you would force me to pay in MMA right now, it would be Jose Aldo, because he's so explosive, and I love how patient he is. You know, in the first round against Gambarian, against Mike Brown, even against Uriah Faber, he takes his time, he figures out his opponent, and then the second round, like a snake, he just pounces on them. And yes, Mark Hominick says that Jose Aldo has never fought a striker like him. He is correct. But he just doesn't have the ground game. He doesn't have that kind of skills to hang with a guy like Aldo. I see Aldo taking this fight to the ground in the second round. I see him standing with him in the beginning of the fight, but second round, he'll be able to finish him.
So you're going with Aldo via second round TKO?
Yeah, I just think Aldo is just too lethal.
And it's hard. How can you argue that?
I have to.
I'm going to be a homer.
You're going to be a homer?
I may not be a homer when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, but when it comes to Mark Hominick, the guy's going to be a new father.
4-1 underdog.
Dude, it's going to be the upset heard around the world. It is going to be Mark Hominick via second round TKO. He's going to avoid the leg kicks. He's going to actually, I think he's got more knockout power than Aldo. I think he's got more knockout power.
Have you seen?
If you caught him.
Aldo
yes, I know what
knees.
you're saying. I'm trying to convince myself of my pick here.
Aldo throws knees like jabs.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Do you see when
knees,
he gets a Cub swarm?
Elbows, yeah. 8 seconds. Double.
So quick. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going Aldo.
Yes.
I'm the idiot going. Well, I'm not an idiot.
Well, you're not an idiot.
You know what? I one time took I predicted against Mark Hominick, and I heard back from the camp because he won that fight. So again, just like Randy Couture, speaking of which, I'm not going to bet against Hominick. I think the Hollywood story is going to be written Saturday night. Speaking of Randy Couture, we mentioned him. As I said, he told me, I ran into him in the hotel. Mauro, 100% certain that I am done following my fight with Lyoto Machida. Well, what do you mean?
Ran into him at the hotel.
I picked up that name.
Yeah.
Randy Couture right here in my head. So what do you...
Yeah.
Speaking of name dropping here, you want to go there? What about Couture and Machida? The fact that Randy Couture has nothing left to do in this sport. I mean, 3-time heavyweight champion, 2-time light heavyweight champion, UFC Hall of Famer. What more is left to be done, and why not go out like he says on his own terms? We've heard, look what happened to Chuck Liddell.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised at the timing. I'm not surprised that he wants to call it quits after this fight. I'm surprised at the timing. Why distract? He has to answer all these questions now, and there's so much focus on could this really be his last fight. He's done this to us before, kind of like the Brett Favre of MMA. A little classier in some of his other endeavors.
He hasn't sent any photos, I don't think.
Exactly, but the timing is questionable, and I don't think he's really sat down with the UFC and talked to them, and right now, if you look at the light heavyweight division, with John Jones being injured, Phil Davis fighting Rashad Evans, you got the Rampage Hamill fight. He beats Machida. He's in the mix to steal Fraser Dana White. What if they offer him a title shot?
Okay, very good point. But does he beat Machida? I think unless Couture can clinch him against the fence, utilize his patented dirty boxing, I don't know if he can take Machida down. I think Machida's going to defeat Randy Couture on Saturday night.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one.
Well, how do we get there then? How do you think he gets there?
Well, here's the thing. Randy Couture wants to close the distance. He wants to keep the fight close like he did against Brandon Vera, right? Look at his last few opponents. I think he lost to Brandon Vera. Then he fought Mark Coleman over the hill. Then he fought James Toney. That was just, that was all Randy from the get-go. So he's fighting one of the toughest guys. Exactly. He's fighting one of the toughest guys he's fought in several years, and Machida is just so elusive. He's not going to allow Randy to grab onto him.
And he's still very much in his prime. Yes, he's coming off back-to-back losses, but let's...
And maybe 3 losses in a row, if you consider the first show.
Sure, but the Quinton Rampage Jackson fight, I had him winning that fight.
No, Rampage won.
Oh.
You don't know what you're talking about.
You don't want to get into the Musasi Jardine thing either, do you, right now?
That was a draw.
Wow. Okay, we have no time, and we're breaking down UFC 129. But he's getting a little more confident. Win an award, start to strut around like a peacock a little bit. So Machida via decision?
Machida via decision. I could actually see him maybe finishing the fight in the third round. Depends on Randy's cardio, how seriously he's taking this training. I mean, he, again, the greatest guy coming up with a game plan. And when he told us many moons ago that Machida was a guy that he wanted to fight, you knew he was thinking about how to defeat him. I just don't think at 47 years old he could beat a very game Lyoto Machida.
I agree with you there. What about Mark Bocek, Benson Henderson? Bocek really coming into his own lately, as I think looking for his 5th win in 6 fights, even beginning to call people out now on the microphone. Brazilian